The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
Enjoy the journey.
The Smithsonian, if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
Welcome back to Blurry Creatures. Tonight's guest, we have Mary Joyce with us from the website Skyships over Cashiers.com, and that is Cashiers, North Carolina. And we're so thankful to have you on the show tonight.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
L.A. Marzulli mentioned you on our last episode we did with him that said, we ask all our guests what their right on the top of the show what their thoughts are on Bigfoot, and he had some thoughts, and your name came up, and I thought, these are some interesting stories. I would love to have her on the show and talk about Bigfoot. So we ask every guest, and I think this will be the whole episode. What do you think Bigfoot is? Where do you think he comes from? Yeah, what are your thoughts there initially?
For your listeners, I live in the mountains of Western North Carolina, and we have a lot of interesting things here. We have Bigfoot. We have underground bases. We have Cherokee Little People. We have UFOs, which is how our website got started. So it's a really interesting place. And Bigfoot, we've been doing stories on that for a bunch of years now. And there's been quite a few stories that we've done. There's been things I've seen myself. I can entertain you with Bigfoot stories however you want to go with it. But I think that in a sense, they're like distant cousins, because Dr. Melba Ketchum is the first one who did research on the DNA. And at first she was really, really mocked for what she came up with. But since then, other scientists and doctors have said that she's correct. And the DNA, which you probably already know, the female side or the mother side is human, and the dad side is something that is totally unknown. It's an unknown primate. So it's at least half human. And one of the gals who has had Bigfoot on her land since she was a kid, and she's so good at communicating with them that she's actually been invited to Siberia to do some investigations over there. But she talked about the wide variety of the Bigfoot, that, the eye color will change, the skin color will change, the behavior, the personality, will vary from one to the other. So there's a lot of human-like qualities about Bigfoot.
Yeah. And we've heard a lot of those stories, and so far everyone's had a different idea of what it is. And Luke and I were talking a couple episodes ago that it might be sort of, some of the ancient Greek stories of the chimerical creatures. It's like this half supernatural entity, half animal, and I'm wondering if it falls in that category where it might be like an ancient experiment.
Maybe we all are. I think sometimes that this whole planet has been a big experimental lab of some kind, and I think there's been a lot of genetic manipulation.
Yeah, LA kind of talked about how you had a lot of these stories where people got friendly with them, and we definitely hear the opposite, where they can be very aggressive and mean. Could you tell us a little bit more stories about some of the
gentle stories?
Yeah, the benevolent Bigfoot.
I think that surprised Marzulli. He actually acted surprised when I started talking about things like that, because I think, viewed them as, didn't think they had a nice side to them. And
sure.
One really cute story is this gal that I started to mention, who's had Bigfoot living on her land since she was a child, had a pony. And every morning the pony was gone. So she decided to get a boat rope about 250 feet long and tie it up so it wouldn't escape every night. And it still got loose. And it's food barrel and its water barrel all got dragged away. And so she would always find it out in the woods. And when she looked at the pony one day, she saw little handprints and little muddy butt prints on the pony. And the Bigfoot were taking their kids for joyrides on her pony, which I think is kind of very human-like.
Yeah. I've heard they braid horsehair. They'll braid.
I've heard that. I've not seen anything like that here myself, but I have heard the story.
Yeah. So she took rides. We've heard a lot of those stories where, like, someone broke a leg in the woods and then Bigfoot carries them to the road, or people are drowning and mysteriously something pulls them out of the lake or the creek or whatever, or the bog or whatever they're stuck in. There's a lot of those ones that'll make you scratch your head and wonder, like, what are these things? Are they mean? Are they aggressive? But you said there's lots of different types of breeds with different skin colors and eye color. How many different types of breeds of Bigfoot do you think there are?
Well, what her name is Robin McRae, and what she said was really variations like we would see in human beings. Some of us have red hair, like you, or kind of reddish blonde. Yeah. And some have dark hair, and some have blue eyes, and some have brown eyes. So her variations were more along those lines. Well, the other angle to it is, like, there's definite difference in size. Like in Florida, where they call them swamp apes, they're smaller. Here in North Carolina, they're more the medium-sized ones. Your largest ones seem to be found out in the Western Mountains. So there's variations that way. There's variations in the number of toes. Around here, they're pretty conventional with 5 toes, but there's reports of 4 and even 3 toes. So there's a lot of variation. Most people around here who've had any negative experience have been people who have been hunting the Bigfoot, who've had guns, who've been threatening in some way, because for the most part, I only hear stories about them trying to scare people away from where they live. They'll toss stones or they'll make bad, big loud noises, but I don't hear the stories of them doing terrible things to people.
Mary, I have a follow-up question to that. I know that one of the things you guys cover in Skyships over Cashiers is the UFO phenomena, and a lot of people actually connect Bigfoot and UFOs.
I can't rule that out, because in the same area where we've had so many UFO sightings, we've also had the Bigfoot sightings. So there may indeed be a connection.
Do you have any hypothesis on that? Like, just with your experience and your study and sort of in your hosting of this space for that, do you have any theory on if there's a connection? I know we've had some guests on that talked about some people believe they are kind of slaves to the Greys, and some people believe that they work in concert with other entities, and that's kind of how the UFO connection works. Some think they drive UFOs. I don't know. Somebody said that. I don't remember who said that, but maybe it was Tom Seward, maybe not.
I've heard those kind of stories myself. I can only really speak for what we've seen around here. And they really do act around here like creatures you would find in the woods.
So very animal-like.
You can't rule that out because we do have the UFOs in the area.
Have you had any experiences with Bigfoot yourself, Mary? Like, have you had sightings or experiences?
One of the guys who's lived here in the mountains all of his life, he took me up to the top of a ridge, and then we walked about a half mile into the woods because he wanted to show me a cave where the Bigfoot hung out. And so we went up this gravel road, and then we started getting out and hiking. And he had, to give you an idea how wild it was, he had a machete to cut down the path so we could get through. And when we started entering the woods, we heard this bird sound that didn't sound like a bird. It was louder than a bird. It was different than a bird, yet it sounded like a bird. And then in the direction we were headed, there was like a response in the same bird type sound. And I couldn't help but think that one Bigfoot was warning the others that there's these crazy white people that are headed toward their cave. And we did see footprints on the along the path there. So putting 2 and 2 together, that was a pretty close incident. For the most part, I personally have just seen the footprints. There's a cave that's way up high. It's so steep that even a mountain climber would have to use special gear to get up to it. And it's a regular path where the Bigfoot come down from that cave, down this big mountainside, and then they cross this gravel road, and then they go down to where there's a source of water and also an apple tree. I've seen those footprints repeatedly. So those are two things off the top of my head.
What got you into this whole topic and this subject? You know, was it an experience like this, or?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the first Bigfoot story we did. The website, Skyships over Cashiers, was actually started because we were seeing so many UFOs in the area. We made the mistake of naming the website Skyships over Cashiers because it's grown way beyond that. We do, many what I would call more cutting edge topics on the website. In the process of covering UFO stories, some of these people started opening up about seeing Bigfoot prints or seeing Bigfoot. And if you like, I can tell you the story about the Bigfoot that would be the most complete. It shows you many aspects of the Bigfoot. It goes from being bad to good. And it started because somebody had started talking to their beautician about there was a Bigfoot on their property, but she was scared to talk about it. And the beautician, over several months, convinced her that she really should talk to me because, it would make a good story. And she finally let us come on her property. Now, she lives up between two bridges, and then there's a creek that runs between them, and there's a single-lane dirt road. And you follow the creek and follow that dirt road, and then it opens up into a small valley. And there's two houses, a pond, and a barn, all surrounded by mountains. And the woman was, at that point, really distressed. She had a bodyguard because the Bigfoot were really bothering her. And what had happened, we didn't find this out until a little bit later, but they had used a jackhammer to try to repair the dam for the pond. When they used the jackhammer, it went right through the rock, and suddenly all the water went down this hole that was created by the jackhammer. In hindsight, they found out that that was the cave that the Bigfoot were living in, and they were pissed. So they started messing with the people's cars. They had their handprints all over the cars. They got in the cars. They turned on the engine, but they never made it go. And each time, she said it's like they upped their game. So they went from the cars and the vehicles, and they tried to break into the little house. And I've got pictures of this. I've got the pictures of all the handprints and on the doors where they were getting into the house. And you could see where they were struggling to get the door open. One day she had gone into town and had left the dryer running. When she came back, there were these muddy giant handprints all over the dryer because they were intrigued by the twirling of the clothing. And so then they upped their game again, and then they broke into the big house. They didn't mess with the downstairs part too much. They went up to where the people live. Her kids were older, much too old to be doing the things that they found on the wall. But it's like they took their kids in there, and they took things and they scribbled on the wall. And we know it had to be the little ones, not the big ones, because all of these drawings and stuff were done down below the light switches. They played with the toothbrushes and the toothpaste. They squeezed everything out. They took the toilet apart. And of course, everyone was grateful that they didn't know what it was for, though it would have made a great DNA sample. And after several different episodes, the woman kind of communicated in whatever way she did it to let them know she didn't mean to mess up their home once she found out that that is what had happened. And it's like they forgave her. And she came, and there was this piece of burlap that had been shaped into a basket. It had these little shiny things in it, and it was like a peace offering. And after that, they quit bothering them.
Wow.
So once they understood that they weren't maliciously trying to destroy their home, it seemed like they forgave them. But they were scared to death. I mean, for her to get a bodyguard who carried a gun, they were scared in the beginning.
Yeah.
Nate would love that. I'm just going to be honest.
Me?
He would love to have Bigfoot leave him a little gift. And,
oh, no.
I think he almost dreams that he can have a Harry and the Henderson situation where he gets to drive Bigfoot around.
I lived on 100 acres in a holler once for a year. And at nighttime, when the sun goes down behind those hills, it is spooky. Like, I could not imagine being in that holler. Only two houses out there. That's a perfect place to get messed with. And how do you, ultimately these stories are, you wonder, like, they don't get any video camera, like, footage of these things.
Now, in all fairness, in my book, which is titled Bigfoot Beyond the Footprints, I've got pictures of the things I was just telling you about.
Oh, like
no, I don't have pictures of the Bigfoot, but I got their handprints, and I've got, you can see where they were messing with the door. And,
yeah.
I've got the picture of that little basket, or gift basket they left.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could say to my, if I was just being skeptical about this whole situation, like when some of these ladies approach you, you kind of know that it's a serious thing, because for some reason Bigfoot's more of a lot of the guys like the Bigfoot topic, and they go out, but when you have some people who show up and there's diverse, and some women are coming to you frightened and scared, that probably helps you go, man, something's going on.
Frightened, yeah. Yeah, and it took her so long to have the nerve to tell me.
Yeah.
And somebody had to convince her to tell me. No, she wasn't out to, get famous telling her story.
I've heard a lot of stories like this, Luke, where someone will buy a piece of property for like dirt cheap, and then they'll have all this Bigfoot activity around their house. All of a sudden, they're like, "Oh, this is probably why they just left the house."
I can see that. It's like buying a house that has a ghost in it. Get me out of here.
Yeah. So what happened? How did that story end? How did they resolve it?
Actually, the bodyguard, who lives on a ridge about a couple miles away from her, who was also scared to death of the Bigfoot, has since become friends with them. And he will put food out for them. And he's gotten over his fear. But I've seen him where obviously he was packing a gun and he was scared to death of them. Yeah. But it's like, I don't know, it's a telepathic kind of thing. And that's why people can't sneak up on them. They know your intention. They can feel where you're coming from. You and I can do that also. They seem to be better at it. There's certain people you meet and you instantly know you don't want to be around them. And there's some people you can approach. I think the Bigfoot are quite good at it. And from what I've seen of human beings, let's say just what we saw on the TV today, they're very smart to try to stay away from us.
Something to be said about what I was saying earlier. Like I heard they show themselves to a lot of women before the men will see them. And then the husbands are like skeptical, and the kids see them often. Women see them often. Do you hear those stories? Is that?
I do, because they tend to be, the men tend to be more macho. They want to go out and tackle the monster. They want to get some kind of trophy. They want to see, I don't know, it's a big...
Shoot it.
You want to shoot it, something. Women, for the most part, don't want to do that. And so, yeah, I think more of the Bigfoot open up with the women. I think that's probably very true.
And how many you think are out there in your, what's the population? Do you have any idea? I mean, if they're living in the cave, how many pack down in there, you think?
They seem to be in small units. There was a man who was a sheriff down in Florida. He moved to North Carolina because he had cancer, and he went into organic farming and moved into a place back in the mountains, just totally remote. And one day he was sitting on his porch and he heard this sound. It sounded like children playing in the creek. And he said, "There's no kids around here. What is this?" Jumping ahead a little bit, one night again, he's seen from his porch, he sees a family, a Bigfoot, going across this little logging road by his place. And he has a light out by his parking garage. And he would see them go across there on a regular basis. Always I think it was the female first, then the kids, and then the male. Typical family is just two Bigfoot. It's not always the case, but that's often the case. So they're in smaller units. You don't see big groups of them. Now they seem to have clans that are spread out, but for the most part, you deal with family units.
And people come to you all the time with these stories.
No, if they came all the time, I'd have a full-time Bigfoot. Every once in a while, those kind of stories are special. And we've done a lot of experiments too ourselves. We wanted to see what the Bigfoot liked to eat. And so we started putting things out on a path where we knew they went through the laurel bushes. And on the website, I have one page or it's in my book, one or the other. And there's pictures of the different kinds of foods we put out there for people to guess which ones the Bigfoot really liked. I'll give you a couple examples since you're not going to go take the quiz. Asparagus, they chewed it and spit it out. They love apples, which I'm sure you've heard other people say. That's nothing unusual at all. They're a little bit like human children. They prefer the fruits over the vegetables. That's pretty consistent.
Yeah. Sounds like my kids. Well, you mentioned some other cryptids that you've heard about and seen, little people. Any Dogman stories or anything in that space? Or
No, I can tell you about the little people. I didn't know about them when I moved to North Carolina, but I kept hearing the Cherokee legends of these Cherokee little people, and I just kind of blew them off as, big stories. And one day, an old timer who lived in this area, he was very well respected. He'd been a World War II hero. He'd been a pastor at one of these mountain churches for over 40 years. Everybody respected him. And one day he came into where I was working and we got into a discussion. He said, no, the little people were real. And he first learned about them when he was helping to build buildings at Western Carolina University. And when they would cut into land that was supposedly virgin land, they would find these little tunnels that were always in real dense red clay. They were square cut with an arch top. And because of him, I spent many Saturdays around kitchen tables with old timers who would tell me these stories about when they were involved with construction at the university. And it must have been a little city of little people at one point because these little tunnels were found everywhere. They also found a little skeleton. One of the professors kept the skull on his desk, and he would tell people it was a Cherokee child skull from the Indian mound. And then one day, English teacher from high school was in his office and picked it up and looked at it and said, this is not a child's skull. It has all of its wisdom teeth. And of course, you have to be a teenager, early 20s before you hatch wisdom teeth.
Yeah.
Another thing, some of these old timers had actually gone to a high school or a grade school even on what is now the campus. And one of the buildings that still exist on the campus had tunnels in the basement. There was these, at least 2 or 3 that went out from the basement. And the little boys would hide their cigarettes in there and get into there through the janitor's closet just to smoke cigarettes because they knew they weren't supposed to. And so they saw, some of these same men that did construction saw these tunnels when they were little boys. They also saw that Indian mound, which wasn't really an Indian mound. According to the old timers, they remember it having a tubular tunnel hole in the center of the mound. And they said the farmer used to put big logs down in there so the cows wouldn't fall in the hole. And the more digging that they did with these early construction projects, any of those little tunnels ended up at this supposed Indian mound. And the old timer said that was just a pile of dirt from digging the tunnels.
Interesting. Yeah, we interviewed Fritz Zimmerman, who wrote a book about all the burial mounds around North America. Do you think these little people are still around, or is this just something that they died off with maybe the ancient giants?
This shows you how you have to change your mind. I think I made a note too. You have to be flexible, right? Because things will change in life.
Yeah.
The title of my book is Cherokee Little People Were Real, which implies it was just something from the past. And since I've done the book, I've run into several things that have convinced me that there are still a few little people around this area. There was an Indian woman, young woman, probably in her late 20s, very shy. Again, it's somebody who wouldn't have talked to me except her friend convinced her that I was okay to talk to.
Yeah.
And she told the story of her family having a place where their clan would meet up in a remote part of the reservation. And they kept a small trailer there for the bathroom and for the kitchen. And so one of these clan gatherings, sort of like a little family reunion, the kids were out playing hide and seek. And she went and she hid to hide in the shower of this little trailer. And when she pulled back the curtain, there was a little guy there with a big smile grinning at her. Then friends of mine who live, again, another ridge fairly close to where I live, had a game cam by their road, and it picked up a small figure in the woods, Actually, what had triggered it was a bird had flown in front of the webcam, and this little figure was off in the distance. It was in August, it was hot, and this little figure seemed not to be dressed. And this couple debated whether they should share it with me. One of them thought it was just a spirit they were seeing or a ghost. One of them thought it might be a real little person. And after they debated for some time, they finally decided to show it to me. And it is definitely something that's alive. And the way I did it was I turned up the color intensity. Anything that's alive will go into a magenta color. And if it's not alive, it will not. And this went to magenta. To show people what I was talking about, I also found a picture that's a confirmed ghost picture, and it's a ghost down on its hands and knees playing with a real live child. So when I did the intensity with the film, the little child went magenta and the ghost stayed white. So this little figure in the woods, even though it wasn't real clear, was clearly alive. And the man went out there they had marked it on the tree about how tall it was. And then they went and measured it. And it was about 3.5 feet tall, which is what I consistently hear from people about the little people.
Yeah, that was my next question, was how big are they? And, they say little. So are they hairy? Are they like little Bigfoot?
They're like regular people.
Like hobbits.
And the ones around here, they look like the Cherokees. So that's no doubt the reason they're called Cherokee Little People.
I mean, I've heard this from a couple guests, and some of the missing 411 theories are that the little people are the ones who are kind of behind the mischievous stuff that happens in the woods with people going missing.
That's bullshit. Excuse me. I don't usually talk like that. But the little people are not abducting or stealing people. I mean, they're not doing it. Okay. They are mischievous. And some of the old-time Indians will, to this day, still put food out for them, like on their porch. And if they forget to do it, they'll start to hear pebbles on the roof. So I do hear about some of the mischief. But as far as people disappearing in the woods, the last people I would blame would be the little people.
Do you think Bigfoot might be a part of that?
That's a big, long story. Let's see if I can keep it simple.
Yeah.
There's an indication that there are aliens that are not nice, and that some of them are known as the dominators. That's one name for them. And that they refer to the earth as the farm, and we are a food supply. That's creepy as all get out, but I'm a little bit more inclined to believe that than I am little people.
Yeah.
Because the variety of ETs there's a lot of variety.
Do you think they're coming from other planets? Do you think they're interdimensional, even though that's...
Who are you asking about now? The ETs?
Yeah, the ETs. I mean, I guess Bigfoot too. Some people wonder if there's stories where they come and go on these UFOs, and that's why they are associated with them.
Well, if you've followed any of the stories about Antarctica, there's some pretty good testimonies about the reptilians having an underground base down there.
I've heard that.
So living underground's a possibility. They come from other places.
Do you think that these ETs are having contact with governments? We had the guy from Israel that came out and talked about...
He has really good credentials. I thought that was worthwhile. As soon as I saw the story out of the Jerusalem Post, I posted it on the website. My goodness, he was the head of space security from the 80s for a long time. Mm-hmm. And he had retired. He had no reason to come up with a story like this and go public with it. I mean, why would you put yourself in jeopardy by doing that? And he not only talked about us having cooperation with at least some variations of the ETs, he also made the statement that they have underground facilities that are being used in conjunction with Americans on Mars. So he gave quite a bit of information in his posting.
Yeah, we interviewed a guest that thinks that that's where they're coming to and from. There's like a base under there too.
Oh yeah. And I've had a wonderful time using Google Earth on Mars and on Earth both, finding things that are just incredible. And on Mars, I have found these giant, like warehouse hangar size entrances into Mars. We're talking about bigger than a plane would need to fly into. Multiple ones. So I've posted that on the website at different times. Also, we found in the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere contemporary living modular pods, I don't know what to call them, biospheres in both at both poles. So it's amazing what you can find with Google Earth if you really try.
I've seen a couple of your links. I followed one, and it looks like there's a disc sticking out of the snow.
That's in Antarctica.
Yeah, and there's the one with the big hole that goes into the cave on Mars. It looks like.
Yeah, that's been posted recently, and it looks like kind of like a volcano with a hole in it.
Yeah.
And but you can see it's not just a hole; you can see a dimension to it.
Like there's something down in there. Yeah.
The posting includes a quote by NASA astronomers about what they think about it. They are now talking about it, but they discovered that, I don't know, back in 20 2001 or something, and it just came out this year, or 2011. I don't remember which it was.
They've been sitting on that.
But they waited at least 10 years before they ever made it available to the public.
And do you think full disclosure is coming soon? Because that's what L.A. Marzulli was kind of talking about. And he also had a lot of biblical explanations to these things. Do you think full disclosure is coming? And where does the Bible play into?
All right, that's two questions. Do I, as far as disclosure goes, it's happening. It's just this slow, creepy, crawly kind of disclosure. People who think the government's just going to stand up and some spokesman's going to say, blah, 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 they're here, you know. I don't think that's going to happen unless their hand is forced into doing it. There would have to be something so undeniable for them to come out and do a formal disclosure. So we're getting in bits and pieces.
And my second question was, do you subscribe to anything in the Bible? Does that enter into the conversation at all?
Well, I know a little bit about Marzulli.
Yeah.
And I know he's big into the bad Nephilims, and he sees those through those kind of glasses. I do believe things like Ezekiel, the description of the wheel within the wheel and things like that, indicates that there were connections with UFOs back then. So in a sense, I accept some of that, but I just can't blame everything on the Nephilim, which he seems to do, and I won't do that.
Yeah, it's difficult because we've had some guests who are like, the Nephilim are a very specific thing, and demons are the spirit of those. And then there's some people who debate, Bigfoot just gets lumped in with the Nephilim, and it kind of muddies the waters.
I agree with that last statement. I think it muddies the waters.
Yeah. What about the ancient giants?
Well, actually, I'd forgotten about that. I've had conversations over the years with a couple of people who graduated from the anthropology department at Western Carolina University. They were the ones that confirmed for me that they had like the little person's skull in their forensic storage area was not available to the public. But two of them who did not know each other over a couple years difference in time, both told me that there were two giant skeletons in the forensic lab, and they had 6 toes on each foot. 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 One thing that made me very disappointed was I was having coffee at Dunkin' Donuts before we had to wear masks, and I got into a conversation with a gal who again was in the anthropology department. And she told me that, I'm guessing it would have been about 2017, that's a guess, that the university had sent all of their forensic skeletons to the Smithsonian, which I found really, really sad, because I've read several books that are very convincing that going back into the 1800s, people were finding skeletons, turning them over to the Smithsonian, and nobody ever sees them again. And there's several books out. I'm not good at remembering all the book titles, but I wish that they hadn't done that.
That was recently.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I can't swear. It's give or take a year on that,
Sure.
but we'll go with 3 years ago, maybe.
It's kind of sad. Yeah, we've heard that all the bones in the Lovelock Caves were around several years ago, and then they're all missing now too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what is the deal with that? Why do you think they go disappearing? Why are people so skeptical of this ancient history? And does it rewrite the story? What do you think?
Well, one of the disappointments that I found with people in higher educational institutes, is that they have a certain idea of how things are, and when things don't fit their concept or the way they think it ought to be, they put it aside as an oddity and kind of dismiss it. You would think that people in an educational field would be super curious and want to learn as much as they could, and instead they will hide the stuff that will make them change their books or change their history.
Right.
And I don't know if it's just that simple, but it seems to have some truth to it.
Yeah. I think eventually, Luke, we got to get our hands on a giant skeleton. That's the
that is the goal.
That would be awesome.
Then we got to figure out what we're going to do with it. So we end up staying alive.
Luke, you look like are you a big guy? You look big on this.
He's a big guy.
Yeah, I'm a big guy.
He's a big guy. What are you, 6'5"?
Yeah, about 6'5". Way more than I'd like to right now, but that's.
It doesn't show from the
I
chest
appreciate
up.
that. Yeah, thank you. You can't see my belly right now. That's a good thing, Mary. Hey, so I want to ask Mary too. I don't know if we covered this. You have a fair amount of stories about Bigfoot sightings. Have you had any UFO sightings yourself? I mean, is it part of the impetus of what's happened here with your website and Skyships over Cashiers and all that? Is that did you have some experiences yourself?
At one point, I lived on Cocoa Beach in Florida. I was between Patrick Air Force Base and the Space Center and saw UFOs when I lived down there. That's a long time ago. It was long before this website was started, which was in 2008. That is how it really got started, but I wouldn't have started a website based on what I'd seen down there. It wasn't until we had so many sightings up here in the mountains that we started the website. One of the interesting things is I got to know some of the people who worked at NASA. One of the guys is Clark McClellan. He's the one who saw an ET in the cargo bay, the open cargo bay. Uh-huh. And so I've talked to him in person. Actually, my first conversation with him was a very traumatic time for him because his girlfriend was the one that was killed in the space shuttle disaster. He made the mistake of talking about what he had seen in the spaceship open bay. And man, did they come down on him. They destroyed his career. They cut him off from his money. I mean, if he's still living, he's, just struggling to get by.
They Bob Lazard him.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's terrible. And what is it about elevations? You said when you get to the mountains, there's more activity. I mean, I hear that all the time. Like, what is it about the elevation, getting higher up, and seems like there's more going on there?
Well, I don't know if that's absolutely true or not, because I did see an awful lot of UFOs when I was in Florida, and besides just the ones I would see out over the ocean, there were a lot that were seen over military bases. And back then, I was doing lectures around the whole state and talked about the UFOs and how they're connected with the bases, and whether they're working cooperatively with the government or they're keeping an eye on the government. It's hard to sort it out. But one time when I was lecturing about it at, where was I? Captiva Island or someplace in that area. And there was 4 guys over at a table off to the side, and they just seemed kind of different, and they were acting kind of different. And so afterwards I went up to them and I asked them, I don't know what to say because it's kind of interesting. They would come right out and say it. But they said they were with Blue Book and they were there because I was talking about UFOs. So yeah, I've had a lot of experiences down in Florida.
Wow.
Another thing that might surprise you from Florida. One day, one of the engineers who lived down the beach from me came to my door with a big box of books. And they were Alice Bailey books, which are theosophy. And he said that the people he worked with had all read them. And I thought that was really interesting that NASA engineers were reading theosophy. So,
wow. That's crazy.
There's a story my father-in-law actually told me that his father was in the military, and he worked near Roswell. And when he was in Area 51 back in the day, and he said he's in security clearance, and even during that time, they would move things around. And while they were moving things around, they had armed guards on the base, and you weren't allowed to go in certain areas at that time. And I just thought that was interesting that you're inside there and you're still not allowed to see what's going on.
One of the stories I did a bunch of years ago again was with William Pollock. The name may or may not mean anything to you. He designed security for Area 51. He designed security for Air Force One, had lots of really good credentials. Whatever he was doing at the time, they were called to a special meeting at Tonopah, which is like a little bit more remote than Area 51. And they were called to give a report on whatever it is that they were working on. And before the meeting, this big plane showed up, cruised right up to the door. And a man dressed in high European-style clothing and an attaché case got out of the plane and walked through the door, sat in the back of the room while everybody did their presentations. He said very little, but when he spoke, it was in High German, and this man found it very eye-opening. The Germans are still very much involved with things that we do in the space program.
Wow. I've heard stories like Valiant Thor was supposedly this guy that visited the president back in the 70s, I think, who was an alien. I mean, are aliens walking among us? Do you think they're already here?
Charles Hall, who has written extensive volumes that should be condensed to something much smaller, but he was out there in that area of Area 51. He was in a remote area. He was a weatherman, and he was doing the balloons and stuff in an area far away from everybody else. Well, he was also there in an area where there was a base where ETs were. Mm-hmm. And he began over time to become comfortable with the ETs, who kind of enjoyed watching him, whatever he did. And over time, he got to know them, and he called them the tall whites. And they would try, the women especially, would try to dress as much like humans and go into Vegas for entertainment, because Vegas is so weird they could often get away with it. But even though they didn't quite look human, there's enough weirdness in Vegas that if they tried real hard, they could. And wow. Then back in 2010, I spoke at the International UFO Congress, which was out in Nevada, and we were staying in a hotel for the whole week. And there was this little guy who got on the elevator with me. I swear to God, he was an ET. He hardly looked human.
Yeah.
And he just kind of scampered away. It was very weird. I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of them can blend in. I think some of them, certainly like the Pleiadians or the Nordics, they look enough like us that they could easily blend in without being noticed. The little guy who scampered, I'm not sure he would blend in too well.
Yeah. Our last guest, Timothy Alberino, was talking about how in the Bible, when the angels rolled into the city, Lot was able to identify them right away because of what they looked like, and he thinks that's because they had super blonde hair and super white skin, and they were just...
Sounds like a Nordic, doesn't it?
Yeah. Interesting. So could they be angels? Or are aliens angels? Or is it the same thing, just word semantics?
My understanding of the word angel means messenger. Doesn't mean flying winged creature. I would be inclined to think that there was a lot of ET involvement that was passed off as angels and things, spiritual things, when it really wasn't. I'm not saying that some of those ETs might not be very advanced spiritually, because they might very well be. I think most of the angels, especially when you hear the description you just gave me, fit right in with the Nordic ETs.
Yeah, that's we're more of in the Bigfoot realm. We talk a lot about that, and we've talked about some of the ancient giants. A lot of guests like to talk about that. The giants is fascinating, but it all kind of relates to that Genesis 6 story when they came down on Mount Hermon and started messing with human beings and created all kinds of crazy things.
Oh, there's definitely concrete evidence that there has been a race of giants that have been dominant on this earth at some time in the ancient past. There's no argument there.
Yeah, some people still see them to this day. They still come out from underground, and Timothy talked about how he interviewed the Afghanistan pilot who they shot one and carried it out. Do you hear any of those like bigger than Bigfoot stories of anything that's just out of left field that just seems that's not a Bigfoot and I don't know what that is?
No.
None of those?
Sorry. No, none of those. No, just plain no.
I think they're super rare. You have to be out in the middle of Canada and miles and miles in, I guess, to see something like that.
Luke mentioned something at the very beginning that he was interested in some of the stuff I found off the coast of California. Have I got that right?
Oh, yeah. The ancient civilization stuff, yeah.
There was a discovery that was made back in 2014 of this huge structure off of Malibu. It made the alternate news sources. I don't think it ever made mainstream. And this thing was huge. It was like 2.5 miles across. The roof, which was like a flat stone, was 500 feet thick. And the pillars that held it up are like 600 feet. That's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I do have a picture of that on the website. I think it's still maybe in the list under the most current stories.
I see that.
So sometime in December, I decided, well, maybe there are other things along that coast. So I got Google Earth out and I started just doing a slow crawl down the California coast, and I found 3 other formations that clearly are underwater, clearly must be old, and clearly are big. The next one I found was off an island called Isla Coronado, which is south of San Diego.
Oh yeah, Coronado.
And if you just go and type in that island, you don't even need the coordinates for this thing because it's bigger than the island itself. It's to the west of it. And it kind of looks, of course, the water makes it blue. It looks like a blue Twinkie with kind of sloping sides.
Yeah.
And it has the portico around it with the pillars. And when you look straight down on it, you can, because it's sloping, you can see the dots where the openings between the pillars exist.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Are you looking at it right now? You can probably
Yeah.
come up with statistics better than I can.
It's crazy looking.
It's like 4 miles long, isn't it?
When I was browsing this, I was excited because L.A. Marzulli, he dug up some photos of giants on Catalina Island, which is right there.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of UFOs in that area, too. So we got another hotspot of multiple activities.
Makes you wonder about all this stuff. Another epicenter.
Yeah, well, so he got the
crazy.
curator, Luke. He got a couple photos of. He was like the original guy to get these giants being dug up on Catalina Island. I think they were like 8 or 9 footers, and
That's a nice find.
yeah,
Very interesting.
because like 95% of all the giant bones are fake on the internet, so it's really rare to find something that's actually legitimate.
There's another structure. Like I said, I found 3 more besides the Malibu one. And the other one looks like the footprint of a community. It's all the angles are square cut. And thanks to Google Earth, you can use a tool to measure things. It's 15 football fields in length.
Wow.
Which is big.
There's a lot of these megalithic structures that are underwater. Do you think they were all like pre-flood and then the world?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah.
And the last one that I found, again, along the California coast was south of Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park and due west of Gorda. And it kind of looks like either somebody on a golf course has been mowing the grass in perpendicular directions or an old farmer's field. It's big. It's 25 miles in one direction, 28 miles in the other. And even the width of the strips of the farmer's field, which is not a farmer's field, are from 1 to 1.5 miles in width. So we're talking a really big structure, which anybody can find. You can find any of these using Google Earth.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it right now, and the old adage that nature doesn't make 90-degree angles. It does look a lot like someone's used a big tractor and done some very perpendicular plowing on the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, and
but for miles.
We can only for miles.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there was structures on top of that or what, but it's clearly, I found nothing else like it along the whole coast, so it's definitely not a natural phenomenon.
I took my senior trip to Catalina Island. Didn't even know. Yeah, I went out there on a boat. I could have been digging.
You were walking footsteps.
I could have been digging for treasures, man.
I
went to school on Cal Poly right there too, right on the coast. So right in my backyard, all these giants and megalithic structures. Do you think people have gone underwater and explore these things? Scuba divers? I mean, do you think they would find some of this stuff?
I can't believe that somebody hasn't done that. There must have. Have I connected with any of them or read about anybody doing that? I haven't, except for the ruins that are found off of Japan, Yanaguni. Now those are pretty. I mean, those are undeniable. Yeah, they really are, and just you Google it. You can find all sorts of photos of that.
Didn't you post photos too of maybe there's another site I was on? They just found a bunch of these structures in Lake Michigan.
I did that years ago. I don't know if that's where you saw it.
It was on like a History Channel special or something like that. Some offshoot. There's so many channels these days, it's hard to keep up. But
listen, I can't even keep up with what I posted.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I wish I could remember all the details.
I know.
But they found something that looks like a small Stonehenge.
Yeah.
That's in the bottom of is it Lake Superior?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's a lake. Oh my goodness! All I know is it starts with a K. It's in Canada, and somebody was using a drone and flying over it, and you can see this ancient structure at the bottom of the lake. So yeah, the Earth is sort of like a blackboard, and somebody writes a civilization on it and then comes by and wipes it off, and a new one gets written down. This is a very old planet, and there's been a lot of things that have happened here.
That's awesome. It's fascinating. I think the giants is it's a big part of our show. It's kind of what we're unearthing. We think they're obviously a part of the megaliths and building these structures. One of these days, someone from some university is going to have a pile of bones, and it's got to come out. They're out there somewhere. We're going to find them. That's the goal.
Somebody ought to go do a raid on the Smithsonian somewhere. Yeah. Somewhere they've got treasures there we would love to see. Another place we ought to go raid is the basement of the Vatican. I mean, there's goodies down there too.
I went down in the bottom of St. Peter's Basilica, and it was a little creepy down there. I think they had all the tombs of all the old popes and stuff.
Oh, with the old skeletons, skulls and stuff. That is creepy.
What it was. We got to get Nick Cage on this.
That is creepy.
He stole the Constitution once.
Yeah,
we can get him in the Smithsonian.
Someone could have broke into the Smithsonian today, right? They're all going for the.
Serious? Oh, yeah.
That would have been the time to do it, right?
That would have time to find those giant bones.
Luke's going to get a job at the Smithsonian and leak us the information. How about that?
He looks like he could take something on anyhow.
I appreciate that, Mary.
Seriously.
I assume that's positive.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I don't know if my wife would like moving to DC.
Oh no, please don't. I wouldn't want anybody to move there right now.
Or Luke, you could be like we heard there earlier in the conversation. You could be a Bigfoot bodyguard.
Well, what I was thinking about was we have somebody who's written a Bigfoot script. I don't know if we'll ever get anywhere with. I shouldn't say we. I don't know if she'll ever get anywhere with it, but she did finish it, and it's based on stuff that she learned on our website. And we could put him in a suit. He could play the Bigfoot.
Was it?
He's not laughing.
Andre the Giant. He's reading your website right now. Didn't Andre the Giant play in the? He was the Bigfoot in the Bond movie. I think he was. I think it was Andre.
I don't know.
Yeah, we were talking about this today.
Luke and I send memes back and forth all day long, so we were.
And it was like from the 70s.
I'm pretty sure it's Andre.
I don't know if it was from Bond, but it was definitely Andre as Bigfoot. Which, I mean, if you're gonna.
How long have you guys been doing your podcast?
I've been in this subject for a long time, but we started right after the summer, so we're fairly new. We kind of did some podcasting in other spaces. Luke did one with his brother, and I did one with another guy that was in a band. I came from the music world.
I came from the sports world. We did a sports podcast, so
okay.
Now we're into more important things.
Well, you're doing a better job than some of the podcasts. Some of the podcasts. You go, these people should never have been given the equipment, you know?
Yeah, right?
Well, I appreciate that. We used to be the best beards in the business until Nate took his off recently.
Yeah, my wife thought I was looking a little bit shaggy. She's like, I don't know. So,
isn't there a podcast that's called The Three Beards or something?
Oh, there's so many these days.
Well, there might be. We're only two. We're only 2/3 of that podcast, apparently. Well, now we're 1/3.
Yeah, we hear that for a couple of people, a couple guests that have a really good time. I think Luke and I did 100 episodes of my last podcast, and you get used to talking. Luke was a sports broadcaster for a while there.
Yeah, dude, in a past life.
So,
where did you do that?
I worked for CBS. I covered the NFL for CBS Digital.
No kidding.
So I actually did TV for a little while.
Well, I want you to know that I have watched more football than I ever have this year.
Yeah, there's time for it this year.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, rattle off some names of football players. I'm not sure I could do that a long time ago.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's about the only thing that was on TV to watch that was live. Well, Mary, tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can find your books, where they could possibly send sightings if they happen to be in the area. I guess you're not even just covering North Carolina now.
Oh no, we get way beyond that. I have 4 books that are currently in print. One is called Bigfoot, Beyond the Footprints. It deals with the kind of the nice side of Bigfoot because I wanted to counteract all this bad stuff you hear all the time. There's one called Cherokee Little People Were Real. Another one, Underground Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains. And the last one seems like it's totally different, tangible evidence of Jesus left behind for us to find. All my books are more like coffee table books because there's lots of photos. We live in a world that's very visual, and everything I do has pictures to go with it, sort of like with the website.
I love that.
And if you want to read just a little bit about each of the books, open up Editor's Corner on the website and punch the part that talks about the books, and there's a little summary of each one. They're all available through Amazon.
Awesome.
And again, the website is skyships.cashiers.com.
Yeah.
How's that for? Did I get all the plug in?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was a complete plug.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All righty.
Well, thanks so much.
I enjoyed talking to you guys.
It's been great. Great talking to you as well.
We'll,
Take
if you
care.
have any updates or anything crazy happen and you want to come on again and tell us some stories, we'll always have you. So thank you.
All righty. I appreciate it. You guys take care.
Let us know if you end up running into Bigfoot out there, because Nate and I will hightail it. We're in the Nashville area.
All right.
We'll hightail it out to North Carolina and
Yeah,
see
I
if
got-
we can't track old Mr.
Some
Foot
guy,
down.
some old guy came up to me at church on Sunday. He's like, "Hey, I heard you're the Bigfoot guy," and I'm like, "What? I just do a podcast." And he's like, "They're on my property. You got to come down. You got to film it all." And I'm like, "All right, I guess let's do it." So, it's starting to
we're
happen.
going.
Do it. If you get something good and want to share it, let me know.
Well, now I know.
We
I got to
will.
put my thoughts out
Absolutely.
there. Hey, I'm your friend. I'm not angry.
Stay mellow. They will not come around you if you're acting unmellow.
I know. Now we know the ways.
Yeah, Nate, you got to bring it down, Nate.
Or music.
Bring it
Music
down.
helps. People have even seen them when they've been at campfires. It's at nighttime, and they'll see them off in the trees because they're attracted to the music.
Oh.
And somebody just called me tonight, and they said that they started singing off in the woods where they'd seen the UFOs. I mean, not UFOs, the Bigfoot. And the next morning found footprints around where she had been making music.
Well, here we go. That's what I did in a past life.
You're a musician, right?
I was. I was in.
Well, you should be able to do it well enough to please a Bigfoot.
Yeah, well, there we go.
Right, Nate had a band called Sherwood, so let's just hope they're Sherwood fans.
Alrighty.
I mean, it's Forest. You kind of have that
Absolutely,
whole thing going,
Sherwood
right?
Forest. Yeah, I got
It's the right. It sounds like the right genre.
I got it. You're good guys. I hope you have a nice evening.
Thanks so much.
Bye bye.
Well, that was it. Mary Joyce, the first lady we've had on the show, Luke. It's been a dude fest for a long time, and we finally broke out.
She's quite versed. Mary's got a lot. She had a lot to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of UFOs to Men in Black to.
And don't you tell
Bigfoot.
her those little people are out doing mischievous things like taking people.
She's not having it.
She's not having it.
No. I see a point too. It would take a whole lot of little people to kidnap a big person.
It would probably take at least 15 to pick you up and carry you around.
Man, what a sight that'd be. I just imagine like the Ewoks in Star Wars just trying to carry me off.
Well, thanks for listening to Blurry Creatures, another confusing episode where we tell you things you thought you understood what Bigfoot was or what's going on in the world, and now you don't. There's these aliens called the Dominators, is what she called them?
She did say that.
Yeah. The Dominators are out there, and they will eat you alive. They farm humans. That's something that I learned tonight, and that's spooky.
I had heard that before.
That's spooky.
I like where Tim Alberino goes with stuff in the sense of, like, there's got to be a more rational explanation for some of this, for some things. I was funny. I was talking to a buddy today. Shout out to Dan and his father-in-law, just about the idea that, we talked about this in a monologue in our last one, about how we'll bring people on here that have different opinions about and contradict each other and don't agree. Tim Alberino and LA don't agree on things. Mary didn't agree with LA on things. Even in the very beginning, Duke and Tom Seward and their thoughts on Bigfoot, those didn't jive. But I don't think that's the point. I don't think Nate and I really have a narrative here we're trying to push by any means. I just think we're trying to talk about things, bring people on here who have spent most of their life's work studying these things and investigating these things, and then let the chips fall as they may. And we live in a crazy world where a lot of things aren't as they appear. And it doesn't mean that there's a fantastical answer. It also doesn't mean there's not. That's kind of where I'm at.
We've had a lot of shows that have been dumping a lot of theological stuff on people, and I know that sometimes people are, I've had friends who just like to talk about Bigfoot every once in a while. So hopefully this show is a little break from the heavy hitting stuff.
Yeah, it's a little lighter.
A little lighter. Yeah. But
it's
nothing wrong with that. It's just
and listen, like this is a space where, I mean, anything and all things go, and I think at some point we gotta break it down and talk about where we're at with things, not just be based on, and I don't know how far in we're gonna get, but we've been diving deep. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we've got thoughts, and you've got thoughts about Bigfoot and the Nephilim, giants, Dogman. Dogman follows you home. That's another thing you love, Nate. This is another thing you love.
Dogman.
I don't know if you do this, but you like to. It's particularly Dogman follows you home. You throw that out there, like, have you heard anything like crazy? This is due to a T, Nate. Anything crazy like, man, you've seen Bigfoot? Maybe Dogman followed you home, and you're.
Hey, maybe I feel like Dogman's coming into your back windows and scaring the pants off.
Well,
you.
I mean, you said you saw something like that, scared you as a kid.
Yeah, saw one in the back window.
Maybe he does. Maybe he does follow people home.
Well, Luke and I hang out yesterday, and we had lunch, and we talked about some big things that we want to do on this podcast. First, we want to say thank you for listening. Pushed us up in the charts. Right away, we got a great compliment from Mary. She enjoyed the show. And a lot of people have been messaging us, sending us some great messages and encouragement. And if you have any, Luke and I have been talking about doing some video stuff. We're also going to do a couple things. We're going to launch a couple pieces of merchandise to support the podcast coming up. So keep that in mind. We got some shirt ideas. There's lots of ways you can support podcasts out there. We've been getting messages. How can I support you guys? I know you guys do a lot of work. We're gonna throw some shirts out there and get some merch going. And Luke, someone out there knows somebody who's got a skeleton or some bones, and we got to find them. We got to get this.
I would caveat what you're saying, Nate, with essentially in times like these, I think it's imperative that we have a marketplace, a free marketplace of ideas and conversation. And so we enjoy this. We invite you into the conversation. If you've got thoughts, comments, you've got stories, reach out to us directly. You can reach out to us through Facebook, Instagram, email. You want to send us a letter? We had one guy, great guy, sent us some stickers and magnets, Bigfoot magnets.
Yeah.
Just because he enjoyed the show. So thank you for that. We love doing this. Nate said yesterday he could talk about this forever.
L.A. Marzulli is 70 years old. He's still going, making movies. He's bummed that he was locked down in 2020. Yeah. So once you get it in the blood, you can't get it out there.
He's a spry 70.
We got to get some scuba gear on and dive off the coast of California, man.
I lived in San Diego for 6 years. I spent a lot of time in the water surfing.
It's scary out there.
There's a lot underneath that you can't see.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we won't go diving. But if you got bones in your grandma's attic, call us, email us, message us, come on the show, tell us about it. We got to track down some bones.
Okay.
There's stories out there. They're somewhere. We're gonna find them. You're the treasure hunter, Luke. We're gonna get them.
Yep. All right, blurry boy.
All right, blurry man.
All right, guys. Thanks again for listening. Hey, hit that subscribe button on your favorite place you listen to podcasts.